Hi, my name's Alistair Bonham, and in this video I'm going to show how I made this diorama using the Mid-poly+Decal workflow. This workflow was popularized around 10 years ago by games like Star Citizen and Alien Isolation. I am an aspiring environment artist and prop artist, and I've been concepting an abandoned futuristic underground environment recently, so I thought that the style of the previously mentioned games would be perfect for my environment. So I decided to do some research into this workflow and how I could use it. Quickly I realised there's not much material on this workflow. There's a couple of videos and posts explaining how it works, but not a lot of resources on how to make assets in this workflow. This video is here for anybody that was in the same situation I was, by showing them how I made my own Mid-poly+Decal workflow and made these assets using it. Bear in mind, and I will be honest, I'm not a technical artist, so there will be modifications that could be made to these assets and to my workflow that will make them look better, maybe by using shaders or some more advanced material settings, but I don't know any more techniques than the ones that I've used. I also tried to optimize this workflow so that it doesn't tank the performance massively, but my focus is just to make the assets and environment look great and not run great. This diorama isn't for a playable game, and it isn't meant to be playable. It's meant to be for a single render, single shot, so there's no player controls or anything else involved for it. If there are any adjustments you would make or any questions you have, please put them in the comments. But again, I can't promise that I will be much help because it took me about a week to get this workflow working for myself and get all the main problems ironed out. With that being said, I'll start off with the modeling. The key technique to mid-poly hard surface modeling is one division bevels with weighted normals. This technique gives the edges really smooth shading at the cost of extra topology. So as you can see here, there's one division bevel, and then here are some more. So it does double the try count for these edges because you'll have to have two triangles for all of these faces. This technique saves so much time from the production of these assets compared to the high to low baking workflow, and it also gives the same result to these edges, making them super smooth. So the way I did this technique in 3ds Max is select all the faces, clear all the smoothing groups, all give them the same one, and then add the weighted normals modifier. I know that Blender and Maya have the weighted normals modifier, but I'm not sure how you select smoothing groups in those softwares. As you can see here, you have some varying results. So for the bevels, it looks great and they do look super smooth, and you've got the results. But for other areas of the mesh, you're having, basically the main area, you're having really bad shading. It's also bad shading around this beveled area. So you're having these where the supporting edges are, they're getting caught or defined when I don't want them to be. So I tried to figure out how to solve this issue. I looked back I made this test model previously, and actually looked at the wireframe for it. So I tried to see what the differences were between these models, and the main one I could see is any pieces of the model that are connected by a single edge, like all of the front of the door. I don't know where I am. all of the front of the door and the bottom. Any pieces that were connected by a single edge, the weighted normals completely shaded it smooth and made it look ugly. So what I did to solve this was basically I would select any pieces that were connected by a single edge and then use detach tool to obviously detach it, delete the example that's already there, and then if I go on to this model here now and add weighted normals, then it looks great and it looks fine and it looks how it's supposed to without adding the horrible areas on the model below. This is great obviously because now it gives you the shading you wanted for those elements, but it also makes the job of adding seams in UV and wrapping easier because these elements are already detached. And another thing is the topology, and optimizing the topology is way easier because now instead of making this face what it would have been before where you've got a connection there and then that's one polygon and two tries, now all you need to do is simply connect, if it lets me select, connect those two faces together. Got that bit selected. Connect these together, and then now instead of 4 polygons, it's just 1. So that's a simple way of. So that's one of the problems I had with it. What this basically meant is I had to do a lot of detaching and add a couple of more bevels. So this was my first attempt and this was my most recent attempt of making the door. As you can see here, there's way more bevels now on this bit, on the little hatch. These areas are still one, these edges are still a single edge connecting them, but because they're detached and let me get it, because they're detached now, there's no shading error. If you're visually impaired, you couldn't tell that at this point I added the decals. The decals obviously are the second half of this workflow because although you have more topology to add to the model, so like at this point I added more edges to the curves, the natural curves of the model, and added more topology for little details like the buttons, which are the details that I kind of love in models and love seeing. So you have, with the mid-poly, you have more room and more polygons to make those elements, but not enough to model and boolean in elements like these divots and little extrusions and little hatches and little spots. So for the decals, what I'd seen from my research was that the decals were added to models by plane meshes and not in engine through projectors. I think this is done for performance reasons, but because I can imagine projectors are more costly for the game's performance than simple plane with an image over it. And especially back in 2014, I don't know how for those consoles, I don't know how well or if decal projectors were a thing. I preferred this method of adding the decals in the modeling software through planes because it gives you more control over the placement and the size of the decals, and this way, and that's basically what I've got to say about that. But the way that I added the decals was basically created this plane through material editor. If this pops up, I basically added the decal atlas to a material, put it on the plane, and then let me get this. basically in this window made a couple of other little planes covering the decals themselves. UV unwrapped these decals so that they were covering the areas of the normal map in the UV map, and then just duplicated, detached, duplicate and cloned all the different decals so that they were covering different areas of the model. I'll try and show off. So for any areas like these that are like where you're extending the decal so that it can do stuff like that, I'll try and quickly show. So basically what you want to do is, well, what you have to do is shrink that element so that it kind of naturally fits. So can I add, there you go. So basically what you're doing is, I'll turn it around because I want to. You want to get it so it's on there, and I'm not going to be precise about this or try not to be so precise about it. This is obviously just demonstrating. Then you go like that, get them so they're around the same size, and then what you do is shrink them so that they are fitting into the decal atlas. So pull that up there, pull that up there, and now if I show off the decal itself, it looks fine, but if I go back a couple of steps, this is what it used to look like. Or yeah, so this is, and that's the decal at this point. So yeah, you need to mess around with the UVs for the decals for any elements like that. You can also, like, I've done a bit of stretching for some of the decals. Like this one is stretched a bit that way, where this one isn't, and it's not as, it's wider but not as long, and then this one is the opposite. So that's about it with the modeling and the decals. So back now in Engine. So all the modeling techniques that I used for the door and the door decals, I did use for the other elements of this little diorama. So you can see here, you've got decals here, here, there, everywhere. And these are all, again, added by using planes and just sticking them on top. What I did do to the normal maps, because what I was having was the edges around the decal elements, so like around these circles, or even were sharp and really like crisp. So what I did in to the normal maps is I put them into Photoshop and then feathered the selection for those elements and then deleted them. You've got to be quite careful with it because it will delete or it will smooth out the edges of the decals. So I think I only put the feathering pixel thingy to like 5 pixels, and these decals are all 2048 by 2048 resolution. So the 5 pixels didn't hurt the edges of the decals that badly. But yeah, so what I did for these elements is, because they're way bigger, UV unwrapped them, gave them a texture density material in 3ds Max to make sure they all had the same amount of pixels per centimeter, gave them tileable materials, and then I put the decals over them. So for the for the wall, as you can see up here, it's a little bit easier to tell that it's tileable. You've got like this bit there, this bit, and then these. You can see the pattern in the materials, but because of the decals and other elements of the scene on this part of the wall, it's actually quite hard to see the pattern, because you've got lighting, you've got decals, and you've got the door and other meshes covering the materials. So this is the goal. with the door, I actually didn't UV unwrap it to have the same textile density, and I haven't given it a tileable material. Just because I wanted different areas of the door to be coloured separately. So you've got the little control button area, and then you've got black and blue for different areas of the door. This is an issue I have that I haven't figured out yet, but basically in order to get the textile density or make it the same as the other areas in the environment, you'd have to have the door be bigger than the UV map. So for elements like these sunken in areas which are black, I'd paint this bit black, but because then this map is like copied there and there, the blue that would be there would appear here basically, and like the black that would be here appears there, and it just gets really messy. And for this demonstration, which just showing the basics of getting the decal and the modeling right, and getting them synchronized in engine, I didn't worry about that at the time. But the reason I used Unity instead of Unreal was because the decals were way easier to edit and to actually set up. In Unreal, there are actual resources I found online on how to get the decals working in Unreal. It's not that hard for like color decals, but for these decals, which are like normal maps, you'll get these little edges crop up. So instead of like modeling the plane so that you bevel these edges and so that it covers it, because that just adds way more topology and way more poly count, which you just don't need for a decal. That's the point of a decal. You're meant to save space. And instead of wasting a lot of time trying to do calculations and sort out the nodes and the blueprints in Unreal Engine, which have always fried my brain, I saw videos on how to set up decals in the HDRP workflow, so that literally issues like these corners are done in a single press. And basically I'll put a video in the description of how you set up materials in HDRP. So it's all about the let me get it up, it's in this one, the detail map, and then converting it so that you can edit the smoothness and the metallicness of the materials themselves. But it's not that hard to figure out, and it's actually, in my opinion, it was easier to do it in Unity itself rather than Photoshop, something like that. So yeah, that is the basics of how I've managed to make my own Mid-poly+Decal workflow in Unity in 2024. Again, I'm not a professional, as you can see. I've done this fairly, like, it's a fairly simple way of doing it. There's probably other things that you can add to make this workflow better and to make the assets better. As I think I said, I'm gonna look into adding more detail to the decals, and more depth, so that it's not just the normal map, and making them colored differently. So that's what I'm going to be working on next. But at the moment, this is the basics of the workflow. I hope this helps someone, because I did spend about a week trying to decipher this workflow and figure out how I can do it myself. There was this account on Polycount called Obscura. He basically did his own little sci-fi door, hard surface sci-fi door using the method. I actually used, it's his decals that I use on the door, and I followed a couple of his designs. His posts and his comments were the most useful part of this, for me to make this workflow. And it makes sense because the guy's now hired by CD Projekt Red, and is a technical artist. So I've got to thank him. But yeah, I hope this helps somebody out who's trying to do this workflow in 2024. So yeah, thank you and goodbye.